Hi, I'm Alex.
And I'm Shane.
And this is the RPM podcast.
And welcome back to another podcast. Today, it is an RPM Roundup, where we'll be discussing the upcoming official F1 2021 game and all what it has to offer. Well, all what we know so far. We've had a very short trailer from Codemasters. It releases in July this year, so I'm sure we'll have a couple more trailers before then. But we have got some information on the story, on multiplayer, and how it changes from previous years. So we're just going to dive in, have a bit of discussion, what we want to know, what we want in the new game, and what we know so far. So just in a bit of a chill discussion. And we'll finish off the podcast with some view from the stands, because you guys have been asking questions, and we'll see if we've got the answers to them. So without further ado, Alex, take it away.
Let's start by talking about what we know so far. Now, I don't think we can really talk about the game without first talking about a little bit of the context for where the game is coming from, who's making it, because there's been a little bit of news regarding that in recent years. Now, Codemasters, the developer, they feel like a bit of a sort of British institution for me in a way. They were founded in the 80s. They're based near Stratford-upon-Avon. Sort of long-standing racing game developer now. They've pretty much established themselves as that. They did flirt with a bit of Operation Flashpoint for a while, but now they're
quickly got back out of that.
Yeah, they did. They've definitely discovered what they're good at and what they're not good at. Now, it used to be Sony that had the F1 license for many years, I think, and Codemasters acquired it in 2008. F1 2009 was the first official game that they made, and they've obviously been making them ever since. But the big news is that Codemasters was acquired by EA for the princely sum of $1.2 billion, which has possibly raised a few eyebrows, as EA doesn't have the best reputation amongst gamers.
No.
They were voted the worst company in America in 2012 by Consumerist, and they have a reputation for shuttering classic developers after their acquisition. Of course, they've been embroiled in various controversies over gambling and style loot boxes and microtransactions that tend to appear in their titles. And so, Shane, in F1 2020, Codemasters already started adding microtransaction stuff in the form of the podium pass, and players can gain currency and unlock cosmetic items through playing the game and by using real money using pit coins. What did you make of that addition to the game? Because this is obviously pre-EA. They'd already kind of looked into adding this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I was just about to say, they kind of dabbled in it straight away in the last year or so. I actively tried to avoid it. So F1 for me is a game where I can come home from work, complete a practice session, and maybe the next day I'll do practice and qualifying, and the next day I'll do, say, the race, and then I'll leave it for a week or so or a month. I don't have that much time in my hands. So what I don't want to do is have to spend money to play the game to its full potential, and that includes multiplayer as well. So actively for the whole 2020 game, I just avoided the whole podium pass kind of pit coin scenario. On multiplayer, I raced with the official liveries. Like, we've got a co-op career and stuff like that. Well, it's not actually a co-op career. It's a quote-unquote co-op campaign. See if we can help each other out. That's besides the point. But race with the official liveries. I haven't really dabbled in online lobbies. And if I did, I've just using the default textures for the car, because I don't feel the need, or I don't want to spend extra money on the game.
Just cosmetic at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just cosmetic. And I hope... I'm all for that. I'm all for people spending money for extra cosmetic stuff. And obviously, we know a little bit in the next game of how that's going to affect what you can do in your career mode. But as long as it stays as cosmetic, I don't want it to be any kind of, if you buy this, you can get enhanced this, or this will help you along your career mode, or multiplayer. As long as it stays cosmetic and has no bearing on the game's performance, I don't mind. It does concern me that EA obviously have acquired Codemasters, and like you said, microtransactions and pay to play has kind of crept in so many of their games in the past. And with Codemasters almost dabbling in it last year, or for this year's game, it does worry me the direction. It really does. As long as I can pick up the F1 2021 game and not have to spend any money to play the game to its full potential, and maybe not have a couple of skins for cars, then I'll be happy. Anything more than that, I'll be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, I agree. I don't really mind the cosmetic stuff. Sounds like there's a dog going crazy outside. I don't mind the cosmetic stuff. I have certainly used, because you can unlock the pit coins that you use to get more skins and stuff. You can get them just by playing the game. You don't actually need to pay for them in F1 2020. And I have used some to buy some of the like skins that I quite liked, but I haven't spent any real money on the game. Similarly, if it's just helping people out in solo stuff and not online, I don't really see the problem with that because it's not affecting people. It only becomes an issue if you're paying for some kind of advantage in multiplayer, because then obviously it is pay to win. You are paying to gain some kind of advantage. I would be very surprised if they did that. So I don't think it will be that. The only thing that's possible is that they've introduced some kind of there's some mention of the deluxe edition is going to have iconic drivers for my team. It's possible that they might try some kind of thing similar to FIFA's Ultimate Team, but I don't know whether it'll be single player or not. As long as it stays single player, it doesn't really bother me because you always have the option to not use it. You have the choice to not use it at all. If it's used in multiplayer and it possibly gives people an advantage, that's where it could be a bit of an issue. I think people will push back on it though.
Absolutely. So 2 points again. F1 over the last 3 or 4 years has really been pushing its esports. And esports is meant to be on a level playing field, giving everyone the same opportunity of the same equipment to prove how good they are and to prove what their teams can do. So by adding any benefits into multiplayer, I feel like they would have to do the same to esports. And for that reason, I don't think they would do anything to multiplayer. Keep it all very much campaign or single player. Now, what you've mentioned about the deluxe edition, from what I understand is, in your career mode, if I'm racing as me in a say Red Bull, I could potentially purchase Jenson Button and have Jenson Button as my teammate. And I don't know what statistics he holds. I'm sure all these purchasable drivers have their own statistics, ranking from whatever to whatever. But very much like the Ultimate Team in FIFA. Again, if that stays in the single player campaign, I don't mind. Would that move over to the co-op career? I'm not quite sure, because then that's affecting. It affects a lot of other stuff, which I don't feel comfortable with.
We just have to wait and see, I guess. I think EA have certainly they've had a few peaks and troughs. I think the worst of their reputation was definitely in the early 2010s kind of period of time. They seem to have learned a few lessons since then, although they did have the big Star Wars Battlefront 2 thing, and obviously that kicked up a fuss. I have actually played that game after all of that controversy, and they've basically stripped all of it out of the game. So to be fair, they were kind of like strung on into it by people reacting. But then again,
absolutely,
sometimes that's required, isn't it? Sometimes people have to make their voice heard, and as long as they actually did listen, they kind of got what they wanted in the end. It's just a shame it required that level of backlash for them to realize that, maybe that is a little bit over the top.
There's a big F1 following, especially the game. There's a big F1 game following on Twitter and Reddit. And I imagine if they started to use that kind of pay to play or advantage if you buy this pack, etc., there would be a huge amount of pushback, because actually there already is. Once a game comes out, unfortunately, people look at the game and tear it apart straight away, just because that's what people do for views. And we're certainly not here to do that. We're here to talk about what we would like in the game, and if it isn't possible, then we'll hope it for the next year. But yeah, if there was like any sort of microtransaction which needed to be done to play the game, then I'm sure the community would push back and actually change it. I think Codemasters once removed the safety car from the game for say 2015, and then implemented the safety car again in 2016, and the community was like, hold on a second, we're paying in the UK £40-50 a year for this game, which people are happy to do because we're fans of the franchise, but you've taken a step backwards and you've removed like a massive asset of the game, the safety car, because they, for whatever reason, they deemed it not necessary. They couldn't do it for that version of the game. I can't remember what year it was. They all start blurring into one once you've owned 10 years of the game. But
yeah,
and then they brought it back the following year because there was an outcry for the safety car to come back because it's such a core function of the game. And I think Codemasters are aware of that. They've got some very valuable assets in the community, massive F1 YouTubers, which a lot of people follow and rely on advice for purchasing their games.
And that's something that could be really improved as well with the EA acquisition. There's one possible positive to come out of that is that the esports aspect of it could be vastly improved. Like you, I don't really play it as much online, but the official game has been used for a lot of these virtual Grand Prix. and the jankiness of the game for its use in an esport has become very apparent. And actually, I think that's a good thing because it's made them realize what they need to improve. And they've now got EA behind them who, to their credit, have a lot of involvement in esports. They're obviously very much involved in lots of sporting franchises. So hopefully that will be a catalyst to really improve the game, its stability and its suitability as an esports title. I hope so anyway.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like you said, watching those virtual Grand Prix when we had nothing else to do last year at the start of the year, it was like, yeah, this is
George
cool,
Russell just thrashing everybody.
Oh, yeah, George Russell, 2020 world champion virtual Grand Prix. But yeah, it was nice to watch, but it was also a bit painful. At points, it was lagging, cars were ghosting, cars were disconnecting.
It was always the lights would go out. The lights would go out, and then the cars wouldn't actually move for like 3 seconds.
Yeah, no one would move for like 3 or 4 seconds, and you already know at the start of the race when everyone's meant to be in sync that's not right. But like you said, big budget EA hopefully can improve those, just improve the quality of that spectacle. Because actually, I would probably watch it a little bit more if it became more of an esport. I would probably watch it if the quality and the production was a lot better. Because it just didn't grip me because the quality was so bad, and that makes me sound like a snob, and I don't mean it at all. But if you're watching something and it's at 15 frames a second, you're gonna struggle to watch it because you're used to watching stuff at 30 frames a second on TVs and monitors, etc. At least, so if they get that quality and production value a little bit higher, it would be great. It would be good.
We do have to be a little bit careful with our potential snobbery, don't we? Because we should preface this by saying that both Shane and I are PC gamers principally and play the game on PC. So we expect a certain standard.
Yeah.
Give me that 60 frames a second. I recently got a new monitor. I recently got like a 1440p, 144 hertz monitor. I need that quality. I want to see. Yeah. It's weird even watching stuff in 1080p on that monitor now looks weird. You're like, oh, this is really blurry, and like, what's wrong with the video? And then you realize it's 1080p.
Maybe pause it and hopefully wait for it to render.
Yeah. So I guess we should point out that obviously we are playing this on PC, so that sometimes can have an impact on your kind of perception of the game and your kind of experience with it. So let's talk about what's actually been announced so far about the game. So we know that it's supposed to come out on the 16th of July.
Yep.
That's been a fairly common area where they tend to release the game, so we can assume that they'll probably be able to stick to that. They've released enough F1 games now, they should be able to do it. We've already talked a little bit about, obviously, there'll be some kind of special edition similar to 2020's 70 edition that they released.
You can get the deluxe edition, and if you buy that version, you get the game 3 days before the 16th, so you get it on the 13th.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
As an added bonus.
They'll probably throw in some other goodies to entice the fans, maybe some pit coins or something.
Yeah.
Now, one of the headline elements, of course, is that Devin Butler from the story that we had in the previous game is going to return in something called Breaking Point. We don't know exactly what it is, but it's some kind of story mode. Firstly, what did you make of the sort of Devin Butler story mode thing that we had in the previous game?
I think it was a good start. Like I said, I probably over the course of a year managed to complete 1 or 2 seasons. And that's very spread out. So actually having Devin Butler was a good, in that Formula 2 battle, that Formula 2 was actually more of a story. It was, do you overtake, do you not overtake, let him win, or, you've got to make those decisions. It was a bit like a Telltale game, like you choose the path you want to take. And then that kind of disappeared at the end of your Formula 2 campaign, and then you go into Formula 1, and then it was just a Formula 1 season, but with a different name beside you. And occasionally, the interviews afterwards would always go back to Devin Butler, your old Formula 2 rival, even though I've seen some videos where you're like a 5-time champion of the world, during the 2019. And on your 6th season, they're like, oh, but what about your old Formula 2 rival, Devin Butler? Hold on a second. Yeah, it's been 5 years now, so we probably don't need to talk about him every race. It was a good start, and I did like the story aspect. And I'm looking forward to having more of a story element. Not necessarily affecting the gameplay at all, like nothing affecting the race, no do this or do that. But actually after the race, what you say, I want it to have more consequences and, more actions. Your popularity with other teams needs to change, and how the press perceive you and how the fans look at you as well. That kind of stuff I'm looking forward to if they bring that back.
Yeah, it definitely has potential. I think my feeling of the Devin Butler whole thing was that it was interesting, and like you say, it was a good start, but it just fizzles out too quickly. It just kind of became a bit inconsequential very quickly. You could be utterly useless in that F2 thing and it didn't really have any impact whatsoever. Or you could be absolutely incredible and again, it didn't really make any difference. Devin Butler was still, a little sod no matter what, no matter what you did. He's kind of an effective character in a way. He was so unlikable that in a way it was just, quite effective. How this will actually work, whether it'll be a separate mode or again, it will just be like a precursor to the full season. I don't really know. It's hard to say until we learn more, but it has a lot of potential. EA, again, have a bit of form in this regard because they did a similar thing with FIFA where you could play as like a specific player and you have a bit of a journey. So I'm kind of excited. I think it could be good fun. And anything that really capitalizes on the drama of the sport and really makes you feel like you're a Formula One driver. One thing they did do in F1 2020 is really improve some of the pre-race stuff, especially when you had my team and you get interviewed by Will Buxton.
Yeah.
And also when you do the normal career, I think you get interviewed by Will Buxton just before you start your first race and you're like behind all of the motorhomes and stuff. And it was really like, it really gave you a sense that you were the driver and you're just about to start your first race. Like anything that's more like that is good in my opinion.
Do you remember, and I don't know how long you've been playing these games for, it's a couple of years, I know that for sure, because we've been playing them for about 3 or 4 years now. But I think it was like F1 2011, where you're in your motorhome and you have like your assistant and they ask you questions and you step outside into the paddock and then you go into the paddock pen and then the press asks you questions. That felt amazing. I can't remember any other game like in the F1 franchise, which made me feel more like a Formula One driver. And then we're going back 10 years now. Every race beforehand and afterwards, you get different questions about what your style of racing is, who you've had like conflict with, and it would affect the ratings up and down. Ultimately, it didn't make much of a difference in your career, but it kind of piled on the pressure. And you could finish a race and be quite angry at the press because you've had a terrible race or you've bumped wheels a couple of times. In this year's game, it's felt a little bit. Whatever I say doesn't have much of an impact. It does ultimately across the teams and your departments, but I don't know. There needs to be a little bit more consequence in my eyes.
It was better than 2019. It was definitely better than it was in 2019. It's what's her face? What's the name of the interviewer?
It's not Claire, is it?
Is it Claire, or is she the? No, she's the agent, isn't she?
Oh yeah, she is. I don't remember her name.
Anyway, the interviewer, the sort of Scottish interviewer woman, she. Those interviews just need to be a little bit more meaningful, don't they? There's a little bit too much of sort of like if they ask you a difficult question, you can just do no comment. Now, supposedly, if you keep doing that, they ask you more difficult questions, but you can no comment those as well. So in terms of game mechanics, it's just not meaningful enough, and it's a little bit too fluffy at the moment. It needs to be a mixture between having the immersion of somebody asking you a question about it, but you shouldn't be able to ignore them. It should be a choice. I don't think they should even have a no comment option. It should be just say this to boost the morale in this department or say this to boost morale within your team, and they need to make a bit more sense as well, because sometimes you might say, oh yeah, we just need to work a little bit on our durability or work a little bit more on this, or things that drivers say all the time.
Which isn't necessarily a negative.
No, absolutely. But then apparently it lowers the morale of your department. Yeah. You're like, well, come on, we're in Formula One here. What do you want me to say? Yeah, everything's perfect. Yeah. Like, it's just a bit silly, really. It needs to be more meaningful.
I remember coming out of like the first couple of races and the interviewer would be like, oh, you left a bit of paint on the walls there. And I think, well, actually, I thought that was a pretty clean race. And your response has to be, oh, the brakes didn't feel comfortable, which is fine because everyone has a bad race. And then yet the brake department hated me because I said the brakes didn't feel comfortable. It's not necessarily saying they're not good enough, just I'm not comfortable with them. So yeah, the questions need to be a little bit more targeted and the answers definitely need to be, they need to be fixed.
Let's talk about what else we know is in the game. So we know that My Team is coming back, which is good because I thought My Team was a great addition. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great addition. I must have spent just as long racing as I did working on my liveries and where my sponsors were going to go, and like I really wanted the cars to look good.
I would love to be able to like a little bit more of a livery editor, like an actual
even
livery
more
editor.
Customization would be good. Yeah, even more.
And I know they have problems with licensing and stuff like that, so I appreciate the sponsors are all going to be fake and not real sponsors. But let me design my car exactly how I want to do it. I want a kind of Forza style or Gran Turismo style where I can put a strip on the side of the car, put some words here. It'll be brilliant. just more customization, because then I'd spend even longer customizing my car, which is the worrying bit, but also it would look even better. I want to be able to build an RPM F1 car.
Yeah. Well, we've already seen a good one from RPM legend Dave Doherty, haven't we? We saw a pretty good one there. We saw lots of good races and that. So it's definitely possible, but more customization is always good. We have co-op career coming in, which is good news. I think that we've always kind of hoped that that would be added.
We've always kind of had a co-op career, but it's just been an online private league between me and you where we race as the same team and tally up the points as the season goes on.
But the car doesn't develop. We basically just, everyone stays where they are development-wise. There's no is this team going to get better, or should we move to this team so that, there's no option to do that. Like, we could start at the same team and then diverge
drift apart
later on.
Absolutely.
That's exciting. That's sort of as emergent storytelling,
Because for those of you who don't know, and not many of you will, we over the last couple of years we've always done this co-op career mode online, and we've started off in a Williams one year, then we moved up to say a Toro Rosso, and then we did a year in McLaren, and we've kind of chopped and changed a bit. I can't remember for the life of me what car we're in this year, because we've focused on the sprint
we started one in AlphaTauri. We started in AlphaTauri.
But it would be cool to do maybe a quick season or a medium season, or pick our own tracks, and then be part of the same team, and then go off in different directions, and then maybe reunite a couple of seasons later.
Yeah,
it would be quite good, and I'm really interested to see how the R&D works while we're talking about this co-op career. Can we share data and help each other out if we're working for the same team? So if we're both working for Red Bull, and your points, your development points, you want to focus on aerodynamics. So once you've unlocked those aerodynamics, does that skill become available in my skill tree? Do you get to share that with me? Likewise, if I'm working on the ICU or the engine and I've upgraded that, do you then get the option to upgrade on your side without spending the points? Is it like a collaboration? Because that would be really cool, really tactical kind of research and development going on there.
Just like real drivers in the team.
Absolutely.
Sharing a little bit, but not everything,
Yes. Because obviously your biggest teammate, your biggest rival is your teammate. But also you kind of want to help each other to beat the rest of the field. So I really hope that the story kind of co-op career is kind of integrated, and definitely have R&D in co-op, and hopefully be able to share those details and work together, but obviously keep that rivalry ripe as well.
We also know that there's been some call for them to add more classic tracks. Now, we do know that Imola and Portimao are going to be added to the roster of tracks, which is great news. And eventually Jeddah will come along, because the track doesn't actually exist properly yet. So you were telling me just before we started recording that apparently it'll be added later
post-launch
or something.
Yeah. So on the press release Codemasters released, like you said, the first two tracks have already been done, and they'll be in the game once the game launches. And then Jeddah will be coming at a post. They quoted free for all players. I should hope so, because it's part of the official calendar. Free DLC. Not like they're doing us a favour. They just haven't got the track up to scratch yet, which is not unreasonable because the track doesn't exist, like you mentioned. But it will be coming shortly after launch as a patch. Whether that squeezes into your career mode, and then if you've started a career mode, does it pop in? Because it's quite late on in the season. So will they put that track in there, or would you have to start a new career mode to incorporate all those tracks? Who knows? But it's good to see new tracks on the game, because for a couple of years we were very stagnant. Like F1 was very stagnant. We had the same tracks over and over again, which is great because you get fast at them and you get really familiar. But
and they've added classic cars, but not classic tracks. And they've had classic tracks in the past. They've had that before. I know in the previous games, like 2015, they added like Brands Hatch and all sorts of stuff like this. And it would be nice if they did that again and just added some more classic stuff. Right, that kind of segues us into kind of what we want to see in the new game. I know that we've kind of touched on a few bits that we want to see improved, but just specifically sort of things that individually we'd like to see in the game. I'll start off with something that we've talked about before, because we also play Project Cars together. And Project Cars is developed by Slightly Mad Studios, another British developer. I think they're British anyway. Pretty sure they are. And they are also owned by Codemasters now. So I was hoping that they could take a leaf out of their book and give us the ability to drive through the pits and into the pit box manually, like you do in Project Cars. Because I love driving out of the pits when you give it a little bit of a slide. Give it a little slide, come out of the pits. Whereas in F1, it's like, oh no, you're in the pits. Sorry, we got to babysit you through the pits. I can't stand that. Let me drive through the pits.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because actually, we have some great fun in the pits on just, like you said, cold tyres, foot down on the accelerator, and you're sliding out the pits, and you've got to maintain that speed. And then you've got cold tyres leaving the pits, and you've got to avoid other cars coming out of their pit lane. Great fun, and really just adds to the realism of the game. It really does. Having
Forces you to be
no
careful.
control. Yeah. And also, while I was talking about control, if we're going to do a formation lap, don't take over in sector 3 and drive me into my pit lane. Give me a box around my grid space. Don't get me wrong. Like in Project Cars, there's a box you have to hit and be within that box to receive your pit crew. Do that on the starting grid. Give me something to aim for, and if I miss it, I get a penalty. If I'm too short of it, then that's fine because I've done, I've messed up my own start. But give me something to aim for and let me take control of where I start, because you see it at the start of every single race. Lewis is pointing one way and Max is slightly pointing towards Lewis, or vice versa, to cover off P3 and P4. Give us that little bit of flexibility. It would make a massive difference.
That in itself is a choice, isn't it? That's like a tactical choice that you can make.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also in Project Cars, it works quite well because as you get to the box, it kind of like slips you in. Basically, you get within a certain, like just as you're about to get into it, and it kind of slips you in. Even if it just did that, just getting to that point would be just really add something to it, because I just don't like the idea that the game kind of babysits you in this particular area of the game when it doesn't. They don't really need to do that. You can always punish me if I get it wrong. Like that's part of the sport.
Absolutely, it's a harsh sport. It should be treated like that.
Your turn.
I don't want to compare to Project Cars again, but I'm going to, just because that's our bit of our relaxation when we record a podcast and we do some sprints and we jump on Project Cars and have a bit of a mess about on that. I want to talk about the graphics of Project Cars, and obviously Project Cars. I believe Project Cars 2 is an old game. Is it only available for PC? I can't remember for the life of me if it's on Xbox
not sure.
or not.
I'm going to hastily Google that now.
While you
Project
hastily
Cars
Google
2.
that, I'm going to talk about the graphics. Now, what I love about the Project Cars graphics is they pop. They're very vibrant. If you're racing on a sunny day, the weather system's incredible. The sky, the clouds, all looks very realistic. The sun flares, the God rays. It looks amazing for a game which has been out for a fair few years.
It's 4 years old now.
4 years old.
And it is available on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One as well.
Oh, interesting. So there we go. So it's just like F1, it's available across the last gen consoles, or what was the current gen consoles. But when it gets darker in Project Cars, or the shades hit the track, the shadows disappear and it gets dark and gloomy, and then it starts to rain, and you see the reflection of the rain on the floor and puddles form in curbs, and it just looks so fantastic. It just really pops out, like as realistic as I expect the game to look. Whereas F1 just feels a tiny bit flat. There's never really much color difference, and the weather is either brilliant blue sky, slightly overcast, or pouring down with rain. There's no different change. It's never like completely cloudy but bone dry on the track. You always know rain is coming. It can't just be a cloudy day. And equally, the rain it changes the color of the track. It makes it look wet. But you don't get those puddles or those streams across the track, which you do get in real life and which are represented in Project Cars. I'd quite like to see just an update of the graphics, especially moving on to the next-gen consoles. Because let's face it, the F1 game is always limited by its lowest common denominator, which has always been the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. PCs have been more than capable of running these graphics for the last couple of years because we have games who do that in higher resolution. But now we've got these next-gen consoles. Hopefully we can update those graphics, make them just a little bit more realistic. What's your thoughts on the graphics?
Yeah, I kind of agree. It is missing a certain je ne sais quoi.
It's missing something, isn't it?
It just lacks a certain ambience. It's just it just feels very matter of fact, the graphics. It's not a bad looking game by anything. I mean,
no, not at all.
But it just lacks a certain personality or something. It just doesn't really. And also they need to fit. This is a sort of PC problem, I guess. But they need to fix the ghosting when you turn DLSS on. There's like a weird ghosting on the cars. That's a graphical issue that I have, where sometimes it sort of behaves a bit strangely. Maybe that's just because of the way it works. I don't know, but
I think to summarize what I think about the graphics is we've played every F1 game for the last 5 years, and we picked up Project Cars 2 within the last 6 months, and that game is 4 years old. And I booted up Project Cars 2, and I thought, wow, these graphics are brilliant. They look so good. And then realized the game came out in 2017. And I just don't get that when I pick up the next F1 game. Or when I picked up F1 2020 less than a year ago, it was like, oh, these graphics are pretty much the same as last year, which were all right, but they've just got a couple more rain effects. So I want to be
sometimes
wowed.
it can be more than just like graphics or shaders or whatever, and it could be like
particles,
almost like an art,
like
an art design choice, almost like. I mean, we both played Valheim fairly recently, right? Now, graphically, that game. Those of you who don't know, it's like a sort of Viking survival game. And graphically, it's very, very simple. It is very, very basic. But what makes it work is a clever art style. So the game looks great because it's got a certain kind of design choice behind it, not just because it's got fancy graphics per se, but because some thought has gone into the way that it looks that goes beyond simply whether or not we've got the latest shaders or high-res textures or anything like that. I think that's kind of what F1 needs. It maybe needs to be a tiny bit stylized, just very subtly. Not like early late 2000 eras where everything was brown, not like that, but like just a very subtle stylization to it. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something needs to change with the graphics. Maybe just needs an update in some way.
But that's all I've got to say about the graphics. So I'll park that. Have you got anything else which you would love to see in the new F1 game?
One thing I did think would be interesting is now that we've added these sponsors for the cars and for the teams and that, it would be interesting if we had, during the career, to have like driver sponsors, even if it's just in the background, like they're not necessarily added to the car or anything, but it's just something that could create more resource points, adds more sort of responsibility to you as a driver. You could take on certain sponsors for you as a driver and meet certain criteria just in order to, like I say, generate more resource points or maybe add to your driver acclaim. It just makes it a bit more realistic, more like being a Formula One driver, because drivers have certain responsibilities to sponsors as much as they do to their teams. That's another possibility to be added. Like I say, it doesn't even have to appear in the game like it does in the My Team mode, unless they wanted to add. There's probably be licensing issues if they added them to the real cars. So I imagine that would be, but they could add it to your helmet. You could add sponsors to your helmet, and that could impact that as well. So that would be another thing to add that could just add to the immersion of, you are a Formula One racing driver.
And it'd be interesting because actually that would tie in quite well with any consequences. So if you did give an interview where you said some terrible things or you had a really bad race and you crashed out and the sponsor decides that you're not meeting their, not necessarily criteria, but the standard of a person or a driver as they expect, like upheld like a really good standard.
Like when they used to have the showmanship thing, which they got rid of, which was a bit like,
which was great.
I quite liked that.
I quite liked that.
And teams had a preference and everything. Like I kind of like that. That was kind of cool.
But if you did anything wrong, that sponsor could decide to leave, and then your penalty could be, okay, they're going to leave, but you're going to lose 10,000 resource points because you've not stuck to that contract. You've not been the good individual you said you would be when you took on that sponsor.
You generate like 10% fewer resource points for the next 3 races or something. It's like bad faith for a bit of time. But
and then people would buy into it.
You could do that with an advantage of maybe making yourself more desirable to another team, perhaps,
or to another sponsor.
Exactly,
which might attract different benefits. So you can see how it all plays out. Like you strategically race harder, which you might bang wheels a couple more times, which would attract this sponsor, which gives you different benefits than your current sponsor, who prefers you to be more of a safer driver. So you can really cater your driving style to the sponsors you want to attract, and likewise with teams as well. I like that. It's a good idea.
That'd be an interesting way of just taking advantage of the kind of mechanics that they've added with the My Team mode. Have you got any more requests yourself?
I do have one more, and it's about the damage simulation. So usually, when I play my career mode, I have like a separate folder, and I install the realistic damage mod off Race Department, and then I switch the folder when we play multiplayer because you can't have any mods. So I'm constantly switching all the folders about. But what the realistic damage mod does, it gives you realistic damage. It sounds really simple, but there's different versions, like from the game, or it goes from 1 to 7, from no damage to if you roll over the curb, you might lose a tire. And there's obviously like a realistic option as well, so which is about 5.5. And what it does, if you drive over debris, you get a puncture. If you do bang wheels, you might not lose a tire, but you might get a puncture like you would do in real life. We've seen many times where, famously, when Lewis and Nico were going through turn 3 or 4 in Spa, and the front wing hit the rear wheel, and then Lewis had a puncture, etc. Nico hit me, blah blah blah. It was quite realistic, and what I quite like to see in the game is something other than a message pop up at the top of my screen saying George Russell has retired, and I find him on the next lap pulled off with no engine blowout, no parts over the track, no debris or anything.
Should be on
pulled off to the
fire.
side of the track. Should be on fire. No, not necessarily that. But take the last race, for example. Bottas and Russell hit each other, went through a polystyrene sign, debris all over the road. Safety car went through it, red flag. Now, I know it probably is a licensing thing again where you can't have sponsors being destroyed in the game. I imagine it's going to be very difficult to do. But I want to be able to not necessarily witness the accident, but if something happens on the other side of the track, see the story, see the track marks, see the skid marks, see the damage on the side of the wall, see the sign all over the road. Make it a little bit more realistic, because at the moment, the only DNFs I see is people just pulling over or pulling into the pits. It just doesn't really do it for me. Like every race, more or less, we have a safety car. Like safety cars are becoming very apparent because drivers are pushing their cars to the edge. Tracks are becoming less forgiving, especially these newer tracks coming in, as in like the old tracks which are coming in, but we're racing at them nowadays. Like, there's gravel and stuff like that. I would love to see that kind of being pushed towards the F1 game, just make it a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, I agree. The damage in general, even on simulation in the game, just feels there's something a bit cartoony about it. You're very, very aware that there's the car and then there's these bits that can break off. And like, it doesn't actually feel like the car really impacts with anything. It can't crumple. It can't really break off. Yeah. And one of the most common forms of damage-related issues in the real racing, tyre-related issues, punctures and the like, almost never happen.
Absolutely.
So it's, I don't know if it's a licensing thing or it must be very difficult to simulate and the like as well, because obviously if you've got to compute all these different bits and parts that might come flying off the car, I understand that might be difficult. But yeah, if they could make it more realistic, that would be quite exciting, just to actually feel like the cars are more like a single unit that can also be damaged, rather than there's the car and then the little bit here that can come flying off. You can almost see the sort of scissor marks where things can come off,
Yeah.
It just feels a bit cartoony.
Because we all know, like, the front wing has green, you're absolutely fine. Light green, you've lost an end plate. A little bit less with front wing, and it goes orange, and then it goes dark orange, and it goes red. Which is fine. I get that. But it just seems it's very procedural. It's very, what's going to happen next. You know what kind of damage you're going to get on your car.
No other part of the car gets damaged.
No. I mean, the floor, it has no sponsors on it. Why doesn't that break? Why can't that have like a bit of crumple zone on it?
You've picked up a bit of floor damage.
Exactly.
Knock
instead of
0.3 seconds a lap off, but we think you can continue.
Yeah. Or if you go over a curb, not only will you get penalised because you've gone over a curb, but actually you'll lose performance of your car, because those sausage curbs in real life are brutal, and in the game you can just bounce over them because it's a game. So I'm trying to make the game harder for ourselves, but in the same way making it more realistic. It'd be quite nice to see a higher.
I don't think it's fun if it's too
damage.
easy. It just feels silly. It's not. It doesn't feel like F1. F1 is supposed to be high stakes, not high stakes if you're bounding around over all the curves.
And high stakes because you're racing the edge of your seat, and if it goes wrong, you get a catastrophic crash, which most of the time, people walk out from absolutely fine. But you can see all this debris all over the place, and it's a spectacle because you think, whoa, they've just walked out of that. What a hero. Not just retiring on the side of the track, 14 laps in, which doesn't generate a safety car.
Yeah, there's a car in this really dangerous place, and there's no safety car, nothing like that.
Yeah, and then it'll just vanish.
Some situations there's almost no red flags as well. You can have these huge accidents, and just not even a red flag. So
you can't even generate them. Like Monaco, you could park the car in the middle of the track, and a couple of cars behind you will lose their front wing and lose a tyre. And in Monaco, if a car has lost its tyre, there needs to be a red flag, and yet there isn't. So
there's some marshal sort of just go doing this yellow flag,
you're fine, you're fine.
Good job, mate. Good job, doing a great job there.
But that's all from me. Pretty simple stuff. In my eyes,
I have one more, which is a little bit of a stretch. But
go on, intriguing. I thought the damage one was a bit of a stretch.
This is quite fantastical, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Go on, I'm looking forward to it.
When you create a character, you can choose an audio name, right? Now,
I'd quite like there to be a Shane.
Well, the thing is, I think they're meant to be surnames.
Oh, okay.
I think that's
in that case, I've got no chance.
They're meant to be surnames, and they're meant to be. There's like nicknames as well, so you can be like the Professor, for example.
I'm Lightning.
Although, you can be like whoever. I think you can even choose Crofty if you really have no self-respect. You can you can pick lots of different names, but you'd think what with AI being able to like do stuff with people's voices where they can basically insert a bunch of somebody saying something and then they can use AI to generate them saying things that they haven't said. You think they'd do that with Crofty's voice so that you could type in your name and then he can say your name. That's got to be possible. It's a bit of a stretch, I know.
I don't think it's a stretch at all. I mean, all we're asking is for someone to read through a girls and boys' names.
Is what I'm saying. I want deep fake Crofty in the game.
Yeah. I don't think that's unreasonable at all because the options are quite limited. It would be nice to have an option to put your own name in.
Yeah, I can't get very close to my name. I just have to make up a character, basically.
Yeah, I've always been Lightning across the Grid game back in the day, and
it just sounds weird though. It sounds weird them saying nicknames like say my name. You just end up
exactly.
like Walter White, don't you? Say my name.
That's it. Yeah. But no, that's a fair one. I don't think that's too much of a stretch, to be fair.
Right, let's go to the view from the stands.
So first one here we've got from Riley Gale 18. Thank you very much for tweeting us again. You were featured in the last podcast and you'll be featured in this podcast. And your opinion is that story mode will be meh, in your opinion. Real season start will be better than what people think, and the new liveries and everything will be class. So clearly not too keen on the old story mode. It could go either way. It could be really cheesy or it could be pretty good, in my opinion. So hopefully, for all of our sakes, it goes in the better direction. And real season start would be better than what people think. And we haven't actually touched on that, have we? Alex, do you want to explain what real season start is?
So as I understand it, it means that you can start a new career or a new career, and it will start where the real season is, basically. So, for example, if you were to start it now, the next race would be Portimao.
Yeah, so there we go. And you can play along every week or every race week, and then your points, from what I understand, will be put up against the other driver's points in real life. So you'll replace a driver in real life with your name. And that's how it works. It's just a pretty cool integration. I think that's pretty cool. I might even try it myself if I should be able to stretch to a race every 2 weeks. Who knows that? And the new liveries and everything will be class. Yeah, I agree. I can't wait to see the new liveries. Although, some liveries I preferred of actually last year's game. So, like the Mercedes. But I'm looking forward to seeing the Haas because I think, despite everything, I think that still looks like a pretty good car.
I really like the look of that Haas. Yeah, and seeing it in real life, I like it even more.
Really good design car with I love the colours. Not so much the Williams, but the Haas definitely gets my vote of confidence. Anything else to add to that?
Well, if we're extending new liveries to the My Team liveries, then I hope that they do some good ones for that as well, because they were very hit and miss. They were either rubbish and were just kind of pointless and just very, very gamey, or there were some really, really good ones. There were some really cool ones that you could use. So yeah, I hope that they keep developing those as well.
Or even better, like a fully customized. Yeah. Let me put whatever I want on my car.
Give us even more customization. Cool. Okay, let's move on to the next one then. So this is another repeat contactor, I think. We got a tweet from Daniel Fergie25. Thanks for getting in touch. He says, story mode is going to be a blast. Ever since Codemasters did the announcement trailer last week, and they had these snippets or teasers with what will happen when you have your battle with Devin Butler, man, I just can't wait to play it when it comes out in July. Feeling the hype for the story mode. I think Devin Butler is a very effective character. You just absolutely despise him. He's so awful, but in that way, he's like a really good character. He's like the Joffrey Baratheon of Formula One.
Yeah, Codemasters did a fantastic job with Devin Butler because they managed to get every single gamer to hate him at the end of the season. So they created the perfect villain in an F1 franchise, and I'm glad they're bringing him back. But yeah, the hype is real. Clearly a fan of the story there.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it as well. I think it will be if they can really capture the drama, capture that real life drama and climacticism of Formula One. That'll be exciting.
Well, I think when they release their next trailer, because obviously you get like the announcement trailer, which is what we've had, and then they'll release like that 2-minute kind of action shot with the official F1 music on top, which is a shame because actually some previous trailers over the years have had some great soundtracks behind them, and it's made the game like look and feel amazing. And the last couple of years, we've had the official F1 theme tune or soundtrack over the trailer. And because I hear that soundtrack every week, multiple times every single week, it gets a little bit soul destroying. I'm not gonna lie, because like we're massive fans of F1, and so if you hear it a couple of times a week, it just feels a little bit uninspiring. And I quite like to see where developers go with what music choice they want to promote their game. So I don't know. I still think it'll probably be the official F1 soundtrack, but hopefully something else to create a little bit more hype.
Well, we mentioned Project Cars as well. The music on the main menu in that is like
yeah.
it's so dramatic. It has like
it's
quotes
so
going on in the background and everything.
Yeah.
Like, well, I go from being like, oh, this is a bit much, to sometimes being like, yeah, racing, racing's the greatest thing. But it
Honestly,
definitely hypes you up. Like,
I completely agree. Sometimes I'm sat there waiting in the lobby, and I'm like, I am ready to race. And other times I'm like, well, this is a bit over the top. But no, most of the time I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I want to hear.
The brief for the composer was, we want you to imagine someone in the cockpit, tears streaming down their eyes as they go for the race win, you know?
We can't quite tell if they're happy or sad, but make them feel something. And that's exactly what it does.
This is Senna Interlagos levels of dramaticism.
Yeah, drama.
We want it to be so over the top.
Oh, goodness.
To be fair, the actual Formula One theme is like that. But obviously we've just heard it so many times.
Yeah.
But it is great. I do like it.
I like
Good job,
it.
Ryan Tyler.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece. It just gets played so much at the moment. But that's fine. That's fine. Moving on. But thank you very much, Daniel, for getting in contact again. And our final contactee is RPM legend Dave Doherty, who I think is tweeted in for every single podcast episode, and we are ever so thankful for the
that's why he's a legend.
Absolutely, RPM legend Dave Doherty. Glad to see you're getting the game title talked about, or the game talked about, as nearly every F1 fan has done on social media and YouTube. Any thoughts on Breaking Point, since this will be the full story that EA know how to do? Any thoughts on Breaking Point? My thoughts are that we've gone from a good developer, like Codemasters has always been a good developer, but with limited funding and limited resources, quite a small team in retrospect compared to other like game developers. Got the backing of EA. We've got this brand new story, Breaking Point, which creates drama, creates hype, hopefully creates immersion as a Formula One driver, and you can like really take control of the situation and make some bold moves on and off track. So I am, if you can't tell, very hyped for this new game. What's your thoughts, Alex? Go on, before I get too smiley.
As I've said, I'm looking forward to it. Quietly confident. I think it could be, as long as it's a bit of fun, as long as it kind of bleeds into the career as a whole a little bit more. It just needs to not fizzle out in the way that it did before, because it was like a nice little start and then it just ended. It was just over.
Yeah.
Whereas it would be nice for it to have real meaning. It needs to be a little bit more impactful on the going forward. So I'm not sure exactly how they would do that, but it either needs to be much longer or more impactful on the career as a whole, or you could choose to not have it at all, maybe. Or maybe it'll be a totally separate mode entirely. We don't even know at this point. We don't even know what it's going to be.
But yeah, I'm sure probably in a month or two, when we have a release trailer and a lot more details, we might do an updated video with what we know yet again and what we're looking forward to with the confirmed details. So stay tuned for that. But thank you very much for getting in contact again, Dave. It is always a pleasure.
Thank you very much to you all. So that's what we think so far about the upcoming official F1 game. Not too much longer to wait. When is it? July, and we're in April, and we're very kind of near the end of April now. So not too much longer to go. As Shane said, we'll probably get another trailer, gameplay trailer or something very soon. Maybe we'll have a chat about that then as well. But thanks very much for listening and watching. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube or on your podcast app, wherever it is you're listening to us. Give us a rating and review if you liked the episode. It really helps us out. We're sort of living in an algorithm-driven world, and we've got to, it really helps us out, just gets us in front of people, and also reminds us that people are watching, because it's very easy. I know that I do the same thing. I watch stuff and I listen to things, and I don't necessarily remember to like stuff or, send a rating or review or whatever. But if you do, it just reminds us that there are people watching, and we really appreciate it. And you can get in touch with us and follow us at RacePerMinute on Twitter. You can also email us at info@raceperminute.com. And if you really, really like what we do, then the best way to support us is to go to patreon.com/raceperminute, where for £1 a month, you can support the show and get your name on all the videos and on our website, Discord access, We've also got merchandise and everything up for grabs. Take a look at it there. There's lots of options. And it helps keep us doing it because obviously we want to keep the quality content coming. And unfortunately, that's not cheap. So
No.
it just helps us out. So that would be great. Anyway, thanks very much for listening. And we shall see you next time, most likely for what will be Portimao next week.
Can't wait.
Looking forward to it.
Cannot wait. See you next time.